Welcome to the 700 Club. More horrible news out of Ukraine. Here's a quote: "Something that can't be happening in the 21st century." That's how a member of Ukraine's parliament described filtration camps, where civilians trying to flee are being forcibly taken to Russia.
More help for Ukraine is on the way. That's the promise from the United States Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense after they arrived in the war-torn country. Heather Sells has the latest.
The Ukrainian president made clear to the visiting U.S. leaders what his country needs.
The priorities are weapons and support from the United States of America and our partners.
In the high-level meeting, Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin pledged to help Ukraine win its war against Russia. They said the U.S. has approved the sale of $165 million in ammunition for Ukraine, plus $300 million in military financing.
We are doing everything that we can to get them the types of support, the types of artillery and munitions that will be effective in this stage of the fight.
We certainly saw people on the streets in Kyiv, evidence of the fact that the battle for Kyiv was won, and there is what looks, from the surface at least, to be normal life in Kyiv. But that's in stark contrast to what's going on in other parts of Ukraine in the south and the east.
Blinken added that Russia is failing in its goals for the war to subjugate Ukraine.
Even so, Russia is keeping up the pressure. 6 Russian cruise missiles hit the port city of Odessa over the weekend, killing at least 8, with fresh airstrikes targeting the steel plant in Mariupol, where thousands of civilians and soldiers are trapped. But today, the Russian military said it will open a humanitarian corridor for civilians to evacuate from the besieged plant. Yevhenia Kravchuk, a member of parliament, warned on ABC's This Week of what are called filtration camps near Mariupol, where people trying to flee are being forcibly taken to Russia.
We do not know how to bring them back to Ukraine.
Zelensky has also accused Russia of deporting Ukrainians, although that has not been independently verified.
A possible sign of hope, the United Nations Secretary General is meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow this week, and then with Zelensky in Kyiv.
All this as Ukrainians marked Orthodox Easter on Sunday, with people in Kyiv praying for those on the front lines and others trapped in places like Mariupol. Even in that city, Orthodox Christians celebrated as smoke rose in the distance from the steel plant. And in Budapest and elsewhere across Eastern Europe, Ukrainian refugees marked the holiday with prayers for their homeland, with many hoping and praying they can return home themselves. Heather Sells, CBN News.
A stark contrast of visuals celebrating Easter in the smoke of war. What Russia is doing right now is just absolutely inconceivable, where you have filtration camps. What they're trying to do is take whole populations and move them. These are things the Babylonians did. This is something that has disappeared from history and now being redone, all in this sort of myth of a greater Russia. And Ukrainians are really Russians, and we're going to prove it by taking them and resettling them in Russia. This is, again, unbelievable. I said it before, I'll say it again. Russia's at risk of forever tarring their entire civilization. The pursuit of this greater Russian myth is actually putting them on the track for destroying their own civilization. How can you recover? How can you possibly recover from the horrors of this war? Well, millions of Ukrainians continue to flee their country. They need a place to get help and support as they arrive in Eastern European nations. Wendy Griffith is on the ground at the border with Poland, where CBN's Operation Blessing is bringing much-needed help.
A lady came in. She and her young daughter, 7-year-old daughter, had escaped from, I believe it was Kharkiv, one of the dangerous areas. And the little girl, it was raining really hard. And she came in soaked and with this tiny little rain jacket. And she asked if we had any coats. Well, thank goodness we have coats here. People have donated coats. And they came in. And, I want to just give you a sneak peek so you can see what I'm talking about. One of the greatest things about this tent is it is warm, and there are hot drinks, and there are blankets, and there's just people coming and going all the time. And come on in here, and you can see it already feels so great. We have a beautiful little living room. Sorry, I just want to show everybody here where people can hang out, and we've got a kids corner with the Superbook playing, and we've got these beautiful lights to make it fun. We've got people eating, drinking, just getting warm. And so this has been such a busy place during this entire refugee crisis. I met 3 women today that had escaped from one of the most dangerous places, and they were on their way to Germany, and they just stopped in here just to, they've been on a 2-day journey with no sleep. So they just stopped in here to get warm and regroup. So we've met so many fascinating people, and they've been so inspiring.
Well, that's just part of what Operation Blessing is doing. The most important piece is the warehouse with food, where we're sending truckloads of food to refugee centers in Poland, but also back into Ukraine, that people are wanting to stay, and they have every right to stay, but they're out of food, they're out of water, and we're providing that for them, and we're doing it in your name if you're part of the Operation Blessing Disaster Relief Fund. If you'd like to give to it, it's real easy. All you have to do is call us, 1-800-700-7000. You can also write to us at CBN Center, Virginia Beach, Virginia, 23463. Just put Disaster Relief Fund in the memo line of a check. You can also text us, text OB Crisis 71777, or you can go to cbn.com. Either way, do it now. Be part of helping those in need. In other news, Israel's foreign minister has responded to criticism about how the government handled the recent Palestinian violence on the Temple Mount. Ephraim Graham has that story from the CBN newsroom. Ephraim?
Gordon, Yair Lapid told journalists terror groups are behind those clashes at the holy site. And as CBN Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell tells us, their aim is to create trouble in Israel and the region.
During Ramadan, Israel has tried to ensure the Muslim faithful could pray at the Al-Aqsa Mosque on the Temple Mount.
There has been a dangerous effort underway in Jerusalem. Terrorist organizations have been trying to hijack the Al-Aqsa Mosque in order to create an outbreak of violence in Jerusalem, and from there, a violent conflict across the country.
While clashes have erupted between Israeli police and Muslims, Lapid maintains Israel is not to blame.
Hamas and Islamic Jihad extremists burst into Al-Aqsa Mosque in the early mornings again and again. They brought weapons into the mosque. They threw rocks and explosives from within it and used it as a base to incite violent riots.
Videos on social media have shown security forces using stun grenades and tear gas inside the mosque. And Lapid points out Israeli police aren't endangering worshippers, they're trying to protect them.
The only reason the police have twice entered the mosque in recent weeks to remove them. If we had not removed these rioters, there would have been a disaster.
Recently, reports are circulating that Israel intends to change rules governing the Temple Mount. Lapid denies the accusations.
Israel is committed to the status quo on the Temple Mount. Muslims pray on the Temple Mount, non-Muslims only visit. There is no change, there will be no change. We have no plans to divide the Temple Mount between religions.
Lapid said Israel had blocked provocation by Jews, and reports indicate no Jews will be allowed on the Temple Mount, probably until the end of Ramadan. Several rockets have been fired from Hamas-controlled territory over the last week, and Israel is focused on containing the situation.
Israel will not accept rocket fire from Gaza, period. We have a zero-tolerance policy for attacks on our territory.
The tension also affected a Christian celebration after Israel limited worshippers for what authorities called safety precautions. Still, thousands gathered for the Holy Fire ceremony at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre on Saturday.
Thankfully, it took place quietly and in an organized fashion.
For the first time in years, Ramadan, Passover, and Easter coincided resulting in violence rather than celebration.
It should be a cause for joy. We should be able to celebrate together, respect one another, enjoy one another's traditions and cultures. That is the true spirit of Jerusalem.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News.
Here at home, the Supreme Court will tackle a dispute today between a Washington state public school system and a former high school football coach. Administrators fired Joseph Kennedy after he refused to stop praying on the field with students after games. At first, his prayer at the 50-yard line was a quiet moment by himself, but eventually it grew and dozens of students would get involved until his termination in 2015. Kennedy's attorneys say the Constitution guarantees freedom of speech and religion and allows him to pray on the field, and students are free to join. But the school district says Kennedy's religious speech could have, in the effect, pressured students to pray and opened the district up to lawsuits. Turning now to political news, former President Donald Trump says his relationship with House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy remains good. It comes after a New York Times reporters released a tape of McCarthy telling other Republicans he would advise Trump to resign following the Capitol Hill riot on January 6th of last year. McCarthy at first denied the quote before the Times reporters released the tape. Some political analysts thought the revelation would damage the relationship between the two politicians, but the president told the Wall Street Journal McCarthy visited him after that conversation and changed his opinion. Orrin Hatch, the longest-serving Republican senator in history, died this weekend at age 88. Hatch was a strong conservative on many Republican issues like limits on abortion, and he helped get President Trump's tax cut bill through the Senate. Hatch also stood up for the Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh in 2018 when he was under fire.
We can't allow more time for new smears to damage Judge Kavanaugh, his family, his reputation, the reputation of the court, and of course the reputation of the country. We cannot allow more time for partisans on the left to try to beat Judge Kavanaugh into submission.
But Hatch was also bipartisan, working across the aisle with Democrats many times during 7 terms that he served in the Senate. Gordon?
Senator Hatch was a great American, and many people don't know his story, how he grew up in abject poverty, but managed to get through his through his talent into law school. But here's a story you may not have heard. While he was in law school, he was married, he had 2 kids. He and his father took a chicken coop and tried to transform it into a cottage. That was their nickname for it, the cottage. And that's where he lived while he studied for law school. It's absolutely amazing, what an American story, to go from very humble beginnings to the height of power at the U.S. Senate. It's a remarkable American story, and it's one that we all enjoy here in America, that no one is just because of birth entitled to anything. You make it here because of your skill, because of your determination, because of your perseverance. So I honor him for his perseverance. It's a remarkable story.